I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capital Download. We're in our New York City bureau with Kellyanne Conway, the first woman ever to run a successful presidential campaign and soon to be a senior advisor in the Trump White House. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Susan.
This is the beginning of a big, busy week for the new administration, including President-elect Trump's first formal news conference since he won the election. At the news conference, will he outline the specifics of how he's going to handle his business empire and concerns about potential conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflicts of interest?
Well, it's a news conference, and the press is welcome to ask any questions that they want to, Susan. In addition, the president-elect and his team have promised to make clear how he will disentangle himself from his many different business holdings. It's just unprecedented that we have a president who's not a typical politician moving from political office to political office, where there's very little to disentangle. This is a man who has considerable assets on several continents, obviously has employed tens of thousands of people over the years, and has a number of successful business deals that span many different states and, as I said earlier, countries. He will address that. That will be addressed this week, either before or during the press conference or both. That's what we expect. I will tell you that with all of the protocol and ethics and compliance experts working on this, certainly all the accountants and the lawyers, he has an entire team of people getting it right. And the idea that you could just sort of wave a magic wand or snap your fingers and have it done is just not true. So he will have a 100% focus on his full-time job as President of the United States.
Do you think this is the concern that some have expressed about possible conflicts of interest with the Trump businesses? Is that a legitimate concern, or is it just one of perception or politics?
Well, for many people it is politics. These are the same people looking for any excuse, any straw to grasp to explain away an election result that they either didn't want and or did not expect, which is the case for most people. Some of the allegations about what would constitute a business conflict just seem to a layperson to be really specious.
Like for example?
Like the fact that somebody from another country would come, or in official capacity would go and sleep at the old post office, the Trump Hotel, pay full free for their hotel room, and somehow would feel influenced or feel compelled to do a deal with the Trump Corporation. That seems really attenuated.
Do you think that this is going to be an issue for 4 years or for 8 years, or do you think people are just getting accustomed to the idea this is a different kind of president whose family has these business interests all around the world?
Well, let's hope it's the latter, Susan, because we need a fully functioning government, and we need a president of the United States who is not constantly harangued by people who are either election deniers, trying to delegitimize his victory and then his presidency, or those just looking around each corner for something. I think Donald Trump himself put it best in an on-the-record interview at the New York Times back in November. He said if it were up to some people, he would never talk to his children again, and that's not going to happen. But look, the Trump Corporation, the Trump Organization will be in very capable hands. Don Jr. and Eric, his two adult sons, have been, alongside with their sister Ivanka, have been helping him to run the Trump Organization for a number of years. They're seasoned executives, very successful executives, who have been mentees of their fathers, but also they've been executives in the Trump Organization for quite a while, accustomed to making these business decisions, pursuing deals, executing. If you look at everything from the Turnberry project in Scotland to the old post office at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., those have the imprimatur of the adult children, particularly Don Jr. and Eric, who will be running the Trump Organization. So people should feel confident about that. People looking for trouble and conflict, I hope that it really is something that is meaningful and consequential and not just political. But they have promised to disentangle themselves, and we're entering new territory just because he's not unlike these other politicians. He's an enormously successful guy outside of politics.
There was a report by Mike Allen this morning that the path has now been cleared for Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, to be a senior advisor in the White House. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, that the path was being cleared. I will let Jared make his own statement because Jared Kushner, I'm sure, is spending a lot of money on lawyers and compliance officers, and has a real interest in taking what has been tremendous business acumen and political instincts during the campaign into the White House as a senior advisor to his father-in-law, the president. Jared's a trusted member of our senior team, very close to his father-in-law, and he also, obviously, like his father-in-law, is a brilliant, accomplished businessman outside of politics. So again, if the lawyers and the accounts have said go, that is the plan, but I will let Jared and by extension Ivanka make their own announcements.
And the concern with Jared Kushner was not only business entanglements, but also the federal law, the anti-nepotism law. And is that path also clear?
Well, that doesn't seem to apply to the situation here, because the anti-nepotism law, as we understand it, applies to you appointing people at agencies. Mm-hmm. It really came after President John F. Kennedy had nominated his brother, Robert Kennedy, who was confirmed and was our Attorney General. And it came out of that. But the president has the right to appoint who he wants, if you look at the law. And so that looks like, under the purview of that law, senior advisor in the West Wing would be fine.
A lot of attention to this issue of Russian hacks, and Democrats from the Senate and House are having a news conference this afternoon calling for an independent bipartisan commission to investigate the Russian hacks. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's curious and a little bit humorous that Democrats right now would be talking about anything bipartisan when they have vowed to not help Republicans who are in the majority, a majority among the American people in the House and Senate, and of course the White House. The Democrats have vowed to obstruct any of our Supreme Court nominees. The Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that on a different network just last week. He doesn't even know who they are or what their bios are, what their beliefs are, Susan. He just has vowed to obstruct and hold up that ninth vote in our United States Supreme Court, our judiciary. The Democrats have also promised, most of them, to not help the Republicans to improve on the Affordable Care Act, to actually make health care affordable and accessible for Americans who, many of them are complaining and very frustrated and nervous, very scared that their premiums are increasing in a state like Arizona by 116%, a state like Pennsylvania by 53%, fewer choices, lower quality, less access, higher prices. And so the Democrats passed the Affordable Care Act without a single Republican vote. They weren't interested in bipartisanship at all. It's the first time this nation has had a major entitlement like Social Security or Medicare, and in this case, healthcare, government-run healthcare, passed without a single vote. So the word bipartisan itself would be very welcome, but it's just a little bit humorous and curious given how they have vowed to obstruct everything we do.
But when it comes to the Russian hack, do you think there's a need for more investigation, or the fact that the Obama administration has done an investigation, which has been a declassified version of it, has been released? Has it been thoroughly investigated? Do you think there's a need for more?
Oh, excuse me, Susan. There seems to be a great deal of information out there from this investigation, from Mr. Clapper's testimony last week, from the intel briefing, and particularly, as you say, the declassified portions that we can all see. And I do find it to be very ironic that the uptick in and the hue and cry of investigation and information has occurred after the election results are in, because Hillary Clinton mentioned Russian hacking of information, alleged Russian hacking of information in one of the debates. Barack Obama, our president, somehow said to Vladimir Putin, quote, knock it off, as if that was going to dissuade them. But let me make very clear, too, what that report says is that there were hackers that aspired to disrupt our democracy and influence our election results. They attempted. They were not successful. And that's very clear in the report that they were not successful. They aspired and they attempted. Now, in terms of the House and Senate investigating,
just on that point, though, the report does say that they didn't succeed in hacking election machines and changing the vote count. But the report says that they are not in a position to judge whether it changed voters' minds about who to support.
Well, we know why the voters voted the way they did. You can look at all the polling, including the USA Today polling. Over 60% for a solid year thought that Hillary Clinton was not honest and not trustworthy. Then that ended up mattering to voters, Susan. They said, veracity and integrity is a presidential attribute. We know that over 70% of Americans wanted change. They wanted to take the country in a new and different direction. We know that Donald Trump, in his victory, was able to carry states where nobody was filing reports respectfully. Nobody was running polling questions that asked about the influence of alleged hacking in our electoral system on those votes. If you go back and you look, those people voted on jobs, they voted on trade, they voted on bringing manufacturing jobs back to states that had been elusive to Republican presidential candidates for decades, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And so we know Donald Trump won fairly and squarely. And the fact is, the Democrats became super duper interested in this entire issue after the election did not go the way they, quote, wanted and the way they expected.
So, when it comes to the Russian hack, President-elect Trump now says he accepts that Russia was behind these election hacks. In the statement that he released after the briefing he got. But there have been questions raised by you, by Sean Spicer, by others about whether the Obama administration's response was disproportionate and out of whack with responses to other hacks of U.S. interests by foreign governments. Do you think that some of those actions ought to be rolled back?
Well, that is the decision for President Trump to make. After he meets with his own intelligence and security team, Susan, and makes that assessment. So one president at a time. We have one now for the next 11 days in President Obama. But at the same time, there does seem to be a disproportionate response, a punitive one, by President Obama in the instance of the alleged Russian hacking, because he expelled 35 Russian operatives. And when China hacked 21 million records of Americans because they were just in the Office of Personnel Management database, these are 21 million Americans who did nothing wrong other than have their records in the OPM. It was basically a little bit shrug-shouldered. I don't think the average American recalls that incident or recalls what we did as a nation in response to that hacking. We know the White House was hacked. We know the Department of Defense was hacked. We know the State Department was hacked. We know other government agencies and departments have been hacked. And we certainly know the DNC has been hacked. And you and I are having this conversation about Russian hacking because the DNC was hacked. They failed to accede to very reasonable requests made by the FBI to turn over their databases and their servers. They refused to do that, and they also either refused or just simply failed to have the proper safeguards and firewalls in place under our very vulnerable, porous, woefully underserved cybersecurity situation. And the RNC, there was an attempted hack there as well, but apparently the RNC had the proper firewalls in place. So I just think what's embarrassing to the Democrats, in addition to not having the proper firewalls in place, is the content of those emails.
Do you think that, I realize we only have one president at a time, and this is not a decision that President-elect Trump would make until after he's inaugurated, but do you think that he will want to consider rolling back some of the steps that President Obama ordered against Russia?
I predict that President Trump will want to make sure that our actions are proportionate to what's occurred based on what we know. I mean, I'm concerned also. We're very concerned that you have leaks of information to the press ahead of the president-elect, vice president-elect, and perhaps even President Obama himself, Susan, receiving the actual information in the report. So that's very concerning because here the punishment seemed to precede the full report.
And President-elect Trump said in a tweet that he had asked the House and Senate Intelligence Chairman to investigate the leaks of that report to NBC. Are they going to? Did the Intelligence Chairman tell him they agreed? Are they going to do it?
Not that I'm aware of, but his point is a good one, which is that we need a full and fair press. We need freedom of speech and freedom of access, certainly under the First Amendment. But at the same time, if everybody's going to be up in arms that somehow intelligence and security is being compromised and that we need to know what happened here, then why did we have CIA officials refuse to go and testify in front of the House Intelligence Committee within the last month or so, and instead speak to the press in these unnamed, unattributed quotes and leaking information? Why did NBC receive information before the next president of the United States? We have to ask ourselves that, and I can imagine, without running a polling question on it, Susan, that most Americans think that's not a good idea. They want the president and the commander-in-chief to have the information first.
If there are leaks like that after Donald Trump is sworn in, do you think that the Justice Department is going to pursue them in an aggressive way?
Well, they may. We'd have to ask Attorney General Sessions that question, and certainly working with President Trump. We're not a big fan of leaks in any event. I think they could be potentially very damaging to White House operations. I'm sure my predecessors on the right and the left would agree. At the same time, when it comes to this, we just wonder why when North Korea, when China, when others, Russia in the past have hacked or tried to hack, that we just haven't heard much from President Obama. I don't remember this being a big part of his platform, for example. Even when he was campaigning for Hillary Clinton, he was out there saying, this is my legacy on the ballot. I will take it personally, as a personal affront, pointing the finger if you don't vote for her, because then you're rolling back my legacy. I didn't hear him talk much about cybersecurity and hacking and its effect on the election. So I think that's why some people are skeptical of putting this up on the pecking order, along with things that they said were important to them in these elections, like jobs.
Interesting. President Obama delivers his farewell address tomorrow, going back to Chicago to do that. Will you be watching?
Absolutely.
And was it a good idea for him to do this, do you think?
Yes, it's a great idea for him to do this because he knows that a great deal of what he did is not going to survive this next presidency, or maybe even this next month in some cases. And legacies, you build a legacy not just by checking the box and passing legislation without a single vote from the other side. Legacies have to be sustained over time. They have to endure and be, I believe, impervious to the mood and differences in the country. And it's not clear that many of his regulations that have hurt small businesses and that we hear from people every day have really damaged the economy and cost about $2 trillion a year. Basically, these regulations, it's not clear that those are going to survive very long, but it's a good idea for any president to address the American people one final time in his own terms, I guess, without taking questions, without being challenged on some of the claims being made. And I guess he'll make it a nice recap of the 8 years, and then I predict he'll preview a little bit of what his role may be as a private citizen past president.
Is it, most modern presidents, when they leave the Oval Office, have not done very much politically. President Carter might be an exception, but over the last several presidents. Is it inappropriate for President Obama as an ex-president to be the face of the Democratic Party, to be a leader in critiquing what his successor is doing?
Well, it's appropriate for any past president to weigh in as they feel comfortable and as appropriate. I do recall that President George W. Bush gave a great deal of latitude and courtesy to President Obama and basically said, I'm not the president anymore, give him his chance to run the country. We would like the same. At the same time, I can understand if the Democrats want President Obama to stay as a face and a voice for the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party has been hollowed out. I mean, there are no pro-lifers, no pro-Second Amendment, no bull-weevil Democrats, no blue dog Democrats, no anti-tax increase Democrats. They're basically of a single mind, and their ranks have been diminishing. The Democrats, under President Obama's watch, have lost over 1,000 state legislative seats. They lost over a dozen governorships and over a dozen Senate seats. They lost 68 seats in the House of Representatives since President Obama got there. 2/3 of the Republican Congress, as we sit here, Susan, were elected since 2010. And it shows you that the Democratic Party under President Obama has not thrived. It has not been successful. It's not growing. It's shrinking. So they don't really have another leader. They still don't have a DNC chair to lead their party. There isn't a very strong bench, I think in part because they coronated Hillary Clinton so early that nobody got to really run against her and show their mettle nationwide. So I think he'll probably do that. The question is, how much attention will the press pay to that? Will he be, will you take the President Obama, if he wants to talk about a particular issue or give an interview? I assume folks would take that. But in the past, they've been less politically active.
Mm-hmm. I know we're almost out of time, but let me ask you, big demonstration expected, big celebrations on January 20th with the inauguration of Donald Trump.
Indeed.
Big demonstrations expected the next day with the Women's March on Washington. Do you take any message from that expected protest?
I've hardly thought about it. We're so excited to swear in the 45th President of the United States and Vice President Mike Pence. I think that every single issue and criticism was fully vetted and explored many times over, moment by moment, in this election, including probably the ones that those who feel they have to come and protest in March. I would like them to reconsider and perhaps just try to sit down and figure out a way to work with their president, because he is their president and their vice president, no matter what their hashtags say, and find out a way to work with them. But I also don't think it's very good, going back to our previous point, for the larger Democratic Party and liberal movement, because it just shows that they're not about progress. They're not about, quote, moving on. They're not about, quote, accepting the election results, which was one of their big banners starting on October 19th or 20th after that last debate. So people have a right to express themselves. I will always respect that. At the same time, you've got to ask yourself, when does that end, and when does at least trying to support and trying to see what the new president will do for all Americans begin?
The Clintons decided to attend the inauguration.
Yes, that's lovely.
Did President Trump reach out to them and encourage them to do that?
No, he did not.
Yeah.
They made that decision on their own. We're glad they're coming to the
Is it
inauguration.
important that they be there?
I think it's wonderful to have any living president, first lady, who could come. We're very happy that President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush are coming as well. We already know that President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama will be there. So I'm really happy the Clintons came. It was a bruising campaign. Hillary Clinton's lost the presidency twice now. Bill Clinton won it twice. They obviously are highly regarded political figures by many in the Democratic Party and others. But it just shows, I actually think it's a great example to those who supported Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump of why we need to come together and respect the office of the president and its current occupant and wish America well.
So last question, we asked on Twitter for questions for you. And here's one from Andrew Seaman, who referred to the Golden Globes last night. And he said, I think you have to ask her favorite Meryl Streep movie.
Oh, there are so many. But I'd have to say Kramer versus Kramer. I feel like it did put her on the map, but it was such a wonderful... It was such a movie ahead of its time, and we needed to have that conversation as a nation. I was 12, and I had come from a divorced set of parents. I really related to that movie, and I thought she just gave a star-turn performance. But there are so many. I mean, I love her character. I love her character. Obviously, her Anna Wintour character. I love her in Out of Africa. Obviously, I'd have to say Sophie's Choice or Kramer versus Kramer would be my two favorites.
So those are very positive comments about Meryl Streep. She had very negative things to say about Donald Trump last night. Did that distress you?
It distresses me in the following way. I think if you have a platform, you ought to be able to use it as you want, but if you really want to try to effectuate positive change and you want to talk about the disabled last night in your Meryl Streep, why not give some voice and some outrage to the fact that just last week in Chicago, a mentally disabled young man was tortured for 30 minutes live on Facebook, Susan, by 4 African-American young adults who were yelling racial and anti-Trump expletives, forced him to put his head in toilet water. If you want to have a platform and you want to protect, then why not use something that's in the news right now too? She was using that really to try to attack Donald Trump. Donald Trump fired back on Twitter today, and look, Meryl Streep and the room she was in represents a small slice of America, and it's a slice of America that has a great platform in Hollywood, I get it, and entertainment, but this was an anti-elite. This was a rejection of the elites, of people in the political media, Hollywood, money access, frankly, that was out of touch with America. I mean, Donald Trump proved one thing mightily. He understood America, and he had the masterful way of communicating and connecting with them. If you look at some of the shows on TV now, you realize that there's some smart people out there who know how to connect with America. I mean, this is the same people having storage wars and, Duck Dynasty, etc. They know what resonates with America, and yet when you have a Hollywood award show, it reverts back to, I think, of a single mind, a certain myopia when it comes to political discourse.
Elite Hollywood has been pretty anti-Trump, I think it's fair to say. Does that matter? Does it matter to voters? Does it create any political problems?
It's probably unsurprising to voters. I mean, they're usually supportive of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, certainly John Kerry and Al Gore. So it's unsurprising in that way. It's disheartening, though, if you have people in prominent places who do have a following and are up on a stage in front of a worldwide audience of tens of millions, Susan. It's distressing to not have some kind of message from someone along the lines of, I didn't like the election result. I certainly wasn't expecting the election result, but he's our president, and pray for the nation. Find a way to work together. Find somebody you know in the administration who can at least hear your concerns. My door is open. My email box is open. And so I would prefer to hear that as well, just as an American who loves the country. Just the way many of us conservatives tried to reach out to people we knew in the administration, find a way to work together. I think there was some good bipartisan work done in the past administration. I can tell you in the last couple of weeks or months alone, Valerie Jarrett, who's very close to President Obama, has reached out to me on numerous occasions. We had a great lunch and meeting last week in the West Wing. She was very gracious and warm and welcoming to me. And I know that she's reflecting the mood and the desire of her boss, President Barack Obama, in welcoming in the senior staff and, of course, the president and his family into the West Wing. So we appreciate overtures like that. We just wish others would follow that lead.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks for joining us on Capitol Hill.
Thanks for having me, Susan. See you in Washington.
I'll see you there. Okay,
All right.
great. I think we're still